What is the first image that pops into your head when you hear the word OCD or Obsessive Compulsive Disorder? Is it of someone excessively washing their hands or maybe checking the doorknob 20 times throughout their day, or meticulously organizing everything in sight, being super neat, having a really clean room? Common phrases that get thrown around when people are just talking day to day about OCD are, "Oh my god, she's so OCD," or "Wow, I'm being really OCD right now." But actual clinical OCD a lot of the times is not what people generally really think about it. Alright, so let's dive into it. So today in this video, we're going to talk about what the psychology experts actually define OCD as well as going over how to identify some of the symptoms in yourself and others according to the DSM. Alright, so OCD isn't just this need to be extra clean or neat or tidy. OCD literally debilitates people's lives in a really intense way. And people with OCD live with severe anxiety. And they live with this anxiety because they have these obsessions that are intrusive and unwanted, both really key words here when we're talking about OCD. The keywords intrusive and unwanted can make someone have this sudden and intense urge to drive all the way back home, 20 minutes drive back, just to check and make sure that they triple locked their door. And this thought will literally not leave the person's mind. Their anxiety will not be quelled until they take that action of driving all the way home and doing that. So that's just one example, but OCD really is about anxiety and this intense anxiety that people have due to certain obsessions. So psychology says that you can think of OCD as this vicious sort of cycle. In the cycle, there is the obsession, the thought that someone doesn't choose to have. It could be hand washing, it could be a multitude of certain things. But the cycle starts with the obsession, then next is the anxiety that accompanies that thought. And the only way to quell that anxiety is through a compulsion or behavior to get rid of that anxiety. And then finally, once that compulsion or that behavior is done, either going back home and checking the doorknob or whatever it may be, we'll go into those later, then that anxiety is quelled and there's some temporary relief, which is the other part of the cycle, which fuels that vicious cycle, and it just keeps going and people find no relief. Alright, so how do you know that a thought is an obsession and it can actually be related to OCD? It's legit OCD disorder. Well, psychologists say that an obsession generally falls within these 5 categories. Alright, there's number 1 is the washers. This is probably the one that you think of most that when you hear the word OCD. It's very common. These people have a problem with contamination and their obsession tends to center around cleaning or hand washing or getting rid of germs or anything related to contamination. Now, just because someone is a little extra clean, maybe a bit intense on the clean side, doesn't mean that they actually have real OCD. People with actual OCD may wash their hands up to 20 times or more a day, or for hours at a time. And some stories have even shown that some people will actually, their hands will bleed from washing them so much. So this is really intense. It's not just being a little extra clean. Hopefully this can give you a little insight on just how serious OCD actually is. Alright, next, number 2 is the checkers. Now, we already used this one and above with the going home and checking to see if the doorknob was triple checked. But these people will excessively check things and have intense anxieties when they don't do this, when they don't quell this anxiety by checking whatever it is that they're obsessed about. And oftentimes their anxieties center around not being safe or feeling like they might be in danger if they don't check whatever it is that they're focused on. This might cause them to rarely leave the house or continuously have to drive back from places just to make sure everything's okay. Oh my gosh, did I turn the stove off? Did I leave the windows open? And even if they've checked multiple times, they still have that lingering anxiety once they leave, and that vicious cycle returns again. Next, we have what is known as the doubters. And this one is a bit hard to describe, but basically, they fear that something bad will happen to them if they don't do something a certain way, or a particular order, a particular way. This could be anything from arranging things in a very meticulous way, or as one girl with real OCD described it as staring at objects in her sight until they felt right. It sounds weird to you and I, someone that doesn't have OCD, but to this girl, her anxiety and her obsession revolved around literally having to stare at objects until they felt right, whatever that means. And then only then could she leave them out of your sight. So those are what's known as the doubters. Something bad will happen if I don't do this. The next one are the counters and the arrangers. These people's obsessions tend to be focused or more centered around symmetry and order. They may have to do things in certain numbers or increments, and they can't miss that increment or that step. Or they may even avoid certain numbers or certain arrangements and just not go near them. Now remember, these aren't just stupid little silly superstitions. These things actually take up real time and thought into people's lives, and it's very intense. So these people may only be able to do things, again, like in a certain numbered way. And if they refuse to do that or they can't do that, then there's this intense anxiety that won't go away until they make sure that they get it done in that right way. So now these are the four main categories that people tend to fall in when talking about OCD. However, an interesting fifth one is actually hoarders. Hoarders can amazingly be considered as having OCD because they fear that something bad will happen to them if they throw anything away. Sounds a lot like the doubters category, right? So as you can see, having OCD is way more complicated than just being neat, being clean, and those normal connotations that people generally have when talking about OCD. OCD tends to fall into one of the 4 or 5 categories that I mentioned above, and their behavior also, and this is the important part, their behavior has to interrupt their normal day-to-day functioning. If the being super clean thing or checking thing doesn't really interrupt how they function throughout the day, they're able to still, have a great social life, go to work, all of that, then generally they would not be considered to have OCD. But if their behavior literally impacts their normal functioning in life, and also the DSM states that if the behaviors take up an hour or more of the day, so an hour or more, then this person would likely be diagnosed as having OCD if those 2 things are true. So remember, key takeaway point before we end the video is that OCD is a vicious cycle. You've got the obsession, the anxiety that comes from that obsession, the compulsion or behavior to get rid of that anxiety, and then the temporary relief, which just won't last forever and will lead back into that vicious cycle. So the anxiety, unfortunately, is never gotten rid of completely. Alright, and that is the video. I hope you guys learned something new about OCD or how to identify it if you didn't know that already before. And if the info was helpful for you, or you'll be needing more psychology knowledge in the future, then definitely hit the subscribe button or consider it so that you don't miss out on any future information. See you next time.